Lego Star Wars is a franchise I'm sure a lot of us have an insane amount of nostalgia for. So when I heard a few years back that they were making a new Lego Star Wars saga, I was hyped. I immediately wishlisted the Skywalker saga on Steam and purchased it the day it came out. Within a couple of days, I played through the first 6 episodes and came away from it feeling pretty underwhelmed. I think that in a lot of ways, Skywalker Saga is a mechanically more fun game to play. However, I feel that the level design was massively inferior to the original LEGO Star Wars. In this video, I'm going to try and compare the two, talk about my likes and dislikes with both games. However, I do not intend this video to be a strict review of either game, more like a comparison with review characteristics. Before we start, I'd like to give an outline on how I intend to compare the games. Unfortunately, a lot of the levels between the games do not have parallels, so instead of comparing the games mission to mission, we're going to compare the games episode to episode, give a synopsis of each mission, and thoughts about the quality of the levels. Full disclosure, I have an infinite amount of nostalgia for the original. However, in my recent playthrough to capture footage for this video, I encountered a lot of annoying and straight up bad levels that I must have overlooked as a child. I don't intend to be particularly harsh, but I will point out what I think worked and what I think didn't. And without further ado, here's the video. Our story starts off with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon arriving aboard a Trade Federation ship. After being escorted to a meeting room, their ship is immediately blown up, causing the two Jedi to try and break out of the meeting room. We then meet TC-14, a protocol droid. This introduces us to the special character mechanic. Some characters belong to a special type that generally have special abilities. Pretty much all character types can open certain doors. Along with this, they have special characteristics that make them unique, such as Jedi being able to use the Force, bounty hunters being able to throw grenades, astromechs being able to glide for a short time, and so on and so forth. Next, we enter a room with two droidekas guarding a transport ship. Droidekas, in my opinion, are one of the most annoying enemies in this game. There is a special way to kill them quickly. However, the game makes no effort to tell you what that way is, so I didn't end up figuring it out until a couple of episodes into the game. After taking down the droidekas, we see how the AI cooperates with the players. A lot of this game was made with co-op in mind, so some puzzles do require multiple characters to solve. The AI, for the most part, is smart enough to help with these puzzles. However, outside of the puzzles, AI are pretty much useless. For some reason, the devs decided that the AI cannot do damage to any enemy, an issue that thankfully was addressed in the Skywalker saga. After battling a few more droids, the two Jedi load onto a transport ship and head for Naboo. Now on Naboo, the Jedi walk through a clearing as waves of droids fly by on speeders and small troops attack the player. After getting through this area, we meet Jar Jar, who basically is one of the only characters in his special category. Jar Jar has a double jump, allowing him to reach greater heights than any other character. Upon reaching the sea, Jar Jar takes Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon to a city full of Gungans underwater. They eventually take some sort of underwater spaceship looking thing and head up to Theed, the capital of Naboo. Once they surface in Theed, the two Jedi, along with Jar Jar, find that Princess Amidala and her guard are under attack by separatist droids. Now we introduce another new character archetype, blaster users. All blaster users are able to use grappling hooks that are in select locations around the map. They also obviously use a blaster. Aiming in this game is kinda wonky. There is no aiming per se. All you do is face the general direction of the enemy that you want to shoot, and the blaster bolt automatically locks on. Due to there being no aiming involved, often shots can hit enemies you don't intend them to, or just random structures in the environment. After some annoyingly hidden grapple points and some combat, we reach a puzzle if you could call it that, where you must stand on a platform that goes up and down while you shoot targets that unlock the door needed to progress. After a couple more easy puzzles, the group finds a ship and leaves Naboo heading for Tatooine. Upon reaching Tatooine, the group realizes that their hyperdrive is broken, so they go to a local chop shop where they find a slave boy named Anakin who offers to compete in a pod race in order to pay for the part needed. What comes next is probably one of the most infamous levels in the complete saga, the pod racing section. I remember this being insanely hard as a child, but in my recent playthrough, I beat it on my first try. Honestly, out of all the vehicle levels in the complete saga, this is the best one. In my opinion, most of the other vehicle sections in this game are just awful. They range anywhere from boring and mildly frustrating to just plain terrible. I honestly do not remember these levels being this awful, but I digress. Upon reaching the third lap, it's basically just a race between Anakin and Sebulba, which Anakin eventually wins. Upon winning, Anakin gives the prize money to the Jedi and they buy the replacement hyperdrive. For reasons unexplained by the game, the group take Anakin with them back to Coruscant. For context, this game came out at a time when the Star Wars prequels had just come out, and the games just assumed that you were already familiar with the source material, so a lot of plot elements are just left unexplained. The game then entirely skips the Jedi taking Anakin to the Jedi Council and immediately skips to the Battle of Naboo. We follow Padme and the Jedi as they attempt to take back Theed. We are also introduced to the astromech archetype, which has the ability to glide for short distances and open doors. Like protocol droids, astromechs require ramps to get into elevated sections of the map and cannot attack other than a shock ability. After some short level progression, we are introduced to yet another archetype, the small character. Their main ability is being able to go through small vents which allow them to go to areas most characters are unable to reach. Towards the end of the level, you're tasked with helping 6 Theed guards who are being held captive by some droids. This is going to be a recurring objective that you'll see reused a couple times throughout the rest of the game. Upon saving the guards, you're ambushed by some droidekas and Anakin hops into a ship, blows them up, and takes off out of the hangar bay. Then the two Jedi meet Darth Maul, who up until this point in the game is never shown. This is the first boss fight in the complete saga, and honestly this is probably the most interesting of the bunch. In the first phase, Maul will throw objects at you, you must throw them back using the Force, and once you hit him enough, he runs away, leaving parts for you to build a bridge across. Then you chase Maul through a little sort of obstacle course until you reach a big room with a bunch of enemies. The enemies infinitely respawn until you kill their captain, who has a yellow body and can also take 2 hits. Once you defeat the 2 captains, you have to fight 2 droidekas, which are standing on floating platforms with buttons on them. It was at this point I remember the way to easily kill them. All you have to do is do a double jump attack, which will instantly break their shields. After beating the droidekas, you follow Maul through a hallway with energy beams that halt your path until both Jedi pull the switch at the same time. Once you reach Maul, you have, in my opinion, a pretty underwhelming fight. Most bosses can be made trivial by simply jump attacking. There's no boss in the game that I've found that is able to do anything against it. Upon beating him, Maul stabs Qui-Gon, killing him. Obi-Wan then slices Maul in half and drops him down a hole. The episode ends with Obi-Wan holding his dead master. And now we get to the Skywalker saga. The Skywalker saga is pretty different from the originals. Gameplay is completely different, some missions are completely done away with, and there are semi-open worlds, which honestly I think was to its detriment, but that's something we'll get into later in the video. The first thing you'll notice is that there's voice acting now, which has been pretty controversial among fans. A lot of the humor in the complete saga was based entirely on silent slapstick comedy. This game still does slapstick, but with the inclusion of voice acting, it's a lot less subtle and often a lot less funny. Our first mission isn't really a mission. In Skywalker Saga, most maps you go to outside of a few missions are open world and stuffed to the brim with collectibles. For the sake of this video, I've ignored most collectibles in favor of focusing on the story. I honestly feel that open worlds lead to a lot of dead air and simply walking around when it comes to this game. One of the biggest improvements in the Skywalker Saga is combat and Force abilities. You now have a lot more control while using the Force. You're able to pick up almost anything, rotate it, and throw it. While combat leads more toward a combo-based juggling system, which I quite enjoy. Our first real mission entails following Jar Jar around for basically 20 feet to the sea and diving in, which takes you to another open world environment. You then follow Jar Jar some more until you reach the Gungan Council. Once you reach them, you ask for help with the droid problem on Naboo. Boss Nass basically tells you to fuck off until Qui-Gon mind tricks him into agreeing. Then you go to a terminal where now they're a mini-game. Upon finishing it, you get to the first boss fight of the game, and I'll be honest, for the most part, boss fights in Skywalker Saga are much better than the original. However, some do tend to drag on for a bit long. For the boss fight, basically all you do is just run away from this giant fish and fire missiles at it, occasionally dodging until a bigger fish comes along and eats it. Then another giant fish attacks you, and you basically keep firing missiles until it dies. Once you escape, you surface in Theed to see the Separatist leader have taken Padme hostage. In this game, after every level you get a Kyber brick, plus the ones you get from collecting studs. You can use these to upgrade your character. There is an upgrade tree for every character archetype, but I mostly dump them into the general upgrade tree. For our next mission, we go and rescue Padme from some droids and then ask her to take you to her transport ship. After this, you get another escort mission with some enemies sprinkled here and there. Once you reach the hangar, you take Padme's ship and fly into space, where you're attacked by a separatist blockade. However, your ship is damaged. You decide to land on Tatooine in order to fix your hyperdrive. Once you land in Mos Espa, Padme disguises herself as one of her own servants and follows you through the city. In this game, there are side quests, but yet again, I ignored most of them in favor of the story. Throughout the city, you ask locals where to get the spare parts, and eventually you find Watto's shop, where he has two slaves, Shmi and Anakin Skywalker. Anakin offers to compete in a pod race in order to help pay for the hyperdrive, and Qui-Gon tells Shmi that he senses the Force in young Anakin. You then walk around the map some more until you get to the race. The pod race in Skywalker Saga is much different than the original. For some reason it focuses on a first-person perspective, which I honestly hate. The race is, however, made a lot easier than the original, which may be a positive for some. Whenever your pod gets damaged, you have to do a pretty jarring and slow QTE in order to reattach one of your engines. Once again, it's a 3-lap race, and as long as you're hitting the boost pads, you should have no problem winning it. The group returns to Watto's shop with the credits won from the race, and Qui-Gon tells Shmi that Anakin is to become a Jedi. Qui-Gon then takes Anakin back to Coruscant with them to show him to the Jedi Council in order to have him become a Padawan. But before they can get to the ship, Darth Maul attacks Qui-Gon. However, Qui-Gon is able to escape. Darth Sidious then tells Maul to follow them. Before we continue the story, I have another gripe. Space travel is boring. A lot of the time you teleport to one place and then have to fly to another just to land on the planet, and then you normally have to take a transport to a different area of the map. But anyway, once the group arrives in Coruscant, Palpatine greets Padme and asks her to come along to a Senate meeting. You then follow Palpatine's slow ass until you reach a transport ship that takes you to the Senate district. Padme then votes no in an election for a Senate leader and tells Palpatine she's going back to Naboo. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan take Anakin to the council and tells them that they plan to make Anakin his Padawan. The Senate shrugs this off and tells Qui-Gon to follow Padme back to Naboo. Once you get back to Naboo, you immediately go to the underwater Gungan city to find Boss Nass, and you find the council room empty. So you return back to the Naboo surface, which makes me wonder, why the hell do you have to waste the time to come down here just to walk to an empty room to be told to turn around and go back to the place you already were? Upon getting back to the surface, you find Boss Nass and his crew of the other Gungan. The game then decides to make a reference to a movie I am almost 100% sure none of their target audience has seen. Padme then admits that she was Queen Amidala the whole time, and the group heads back to the Theed hangars. Anakin hops in one of the ships, and then Darth Maul appears. This is the first actual boss fight of the game. Instead of just a few hearts, Darth Maul now has 4 separate health bars. This is what I meant when I said that they could tend to drag on for a bit. Once you finish off Maul's first health bar, he starts to run as a bunch of droids begin to spawn. You continue to follow him until you have another fight on a walkway next to, seemingly, a bottomless pit. After you chew through another health bar, you throw him off the ledge and he lands on another walkway, where he destroys the floor, causing you to basically have to do a QTE to cross it. You fight another wave of enemies and he breaks the floor again. You then find an elevator to be able to jump over the broken walkway, and another fight with Maul ensues. After chewing through yet another health bar, you follow Maul into the laser wall hallway, but instead of pulling levers, you have to place color-coded fuses into power boxes to open the doors. Once you finally get to Maul, the final fight starts. The fight's basically the same as before, however, he glitched for me and got stuck in the doorway. The game then decides to change the way that Qui-Gon dies. Then Obi-Wan punts Maul's disembodied head into the void. We then cut to probably the most puzzling section of Episode 1. For some reason, they decide to dedicate a whole section of the game to the Battle of Naboo from the Gungans' perspectives, which pretty much includes rolling a ball of energy to a catapult and defending a giant creature from droids. Towards the end of the mission, you get to hurl bombs at a huge mass of droids and tanks, which is cool, I guess, but still didn't give a reason for this mission to exist in the first place. After blowing up a bunch of droids, they surround Jar Jar and the rest of the Gungans. We then cut to Anakin flying a spaceship towards a Trade Federation ship. As far as vehicle sections go, this one's alright. Pretty much all you do is destroy a certain amount of satellite dishes, a certain amount of cannons, and a certain amount of other fighters until the health bar on the Trade Federation ship depletes. Once it does, you fly into the hangar and start just blowing shit up. When you reach the end of the hangar, your ship hits the ground and you begin wildly shooting everything in the ship until it explodes. Once you do, all the droids on Naboo that the Gungans were fighting are disabled, and the members of the Trade Federation are arrested. Obi-Wan then tells Anakin that he will take him on as his Padawan and train him to be a Jedi. Originally, this was going to be just one big video, and then I realized that it would probably be 2.5 hours long. And I think that's a much harder sell for someone to want to watch, and most people tend to watch longer videos in multiple sittings, so I decided it would just be best to make 6 individual videos. So this was part 1. Hopefully within a few days to a week I'll have another episode out, but for the time being, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more content like this, feel free to subscribe. Again, I am fairly new to editing and I'm learning the software as I go. So if my editing is bad, I promise that with some time I will improve. Anyway, thanks for watching and see you next time.